Carl Jung showed us that the path to healing begins with an understandable, yet such a complex step: learning to choose yourself in a world that constantly forces us to focus on others, adapt, seek approval, and meet others' expectations. We live in an endless struggle to be recognized, loved, appreciated, but rarely stop and ask ourselves, what do I want? What do I really need to feel happy, joyful, and whole? The answer to this question never lies in the external world, not in the boss's praise, not in the parents' approval, not in the partner's admiration. It is always inside, in that quiet but persistent part of ourselves that knows the truth, but which we so often silence because we're afraid of being inconvenient, too much, not right. Choosing yourself is not selfishness, as many are used to thinking. It's finally turning to face the most important person in your life, yourself. It's giving yourself that attention, that care, and that respect which we so easily share with others, but so rarely keep for ourselves. Jung warned, most of our emotional wounds, anxieties, and disappointments grow from one root: the break with our own essence. We play roles for years: the exemplary employee, the convenient partner, the ideal parent. And at some point, we suddenly realize that we've forgotten who we really are. We become strangers to ourselves. And from this, an emptiness settles inside, which we try to fill with anything: work, relationships, shopping, social media. But it doesn't disappear, because the root of the problem is not in the lack of external things, but in the loss of the internal. But here's what's important to understand. Everything we suppress, everything we deny ourselves, everything we hide even from ourselves, doesn't disappear. It turns into a shadow that sooner or later comes to light through repeating scenarios in relationships, through self-destructive habits, through sudden crises, or through that very feeling of emptiness that doesn't go away even when everything in life is fine. You can ask yourself for years, why doesn't life change? Why do I keep stepping on the same rakes? Why am I surrounded by people who don't value me? But the answer will always be the same, because the problem is not outside, but inside. Because until you start listening to yourself, the world will reflect your inner state. And if there's chaos inside, there will be chaos outside too. Healing doesn't begin when you find the right partner, the perfect job, or a new circle of friends. It begins when you stop looking for salvation outside and finally dare to look inside yourself. Imagine that your life is a mirror of your inner world. If you're constantly surrounded by people who don't value you, if you feel that your energy is draining into toxic relationships or meaningless affairs, if you repeatedly find yourself in situations where you're used, devalued, or ignored, this is not an accident. This is your subconscious screaming at you. Stop. Something's wrong here. The question is only whether you're ready to hear it. Most people prefer not to notice these signals because meeting yourself is perhaps the hardest thing there can be. Acknowledging your wounds, your fears, your mistakes, realizing that for many years you yourself allowed the pain to continue, this requires enormous courage. But it's right here, at this point of awareness, that real transformation begins. You won't heal if you continue to feed your wound. It's impossible to get rid of anxiety if you replay a catastrophic scenario in your head every day. You can't fill yourself if you surround yourself with people who drain you. You can't gain confidence if you constantly wait for someone else to confirm your worth. Jung spoke about individuation, the process in which we gradually free ourselves from the pressure of external expectations and return to ourselves. This doesn't mean leaving the world and living in complete solitude. It means stopping waiting for others to tell you who you are, what to do, and how to live. Remember how many times you gave up your desires because you were afraid of judgment. How many times did you say yes when inside you were screaming no? How many times did you ignore your intuition because you had to be convenient? When you start choosing yourself, something amazing happens. You activate the law of attraction at a different level. You no longer settle for emotional crumbs. Don't wait for someone to fill your emptiness. You don't try to fit into others' standards. You understand that your value is not in pleasing, but in being yourself. And then the world around you gradually begins to change. Relationships that used to drain your strength lose their power. Situations that brought you to tears no longer seem like a catastrophe. Not because the world has changed, but because you have changed. But this path is not about instant transformation. It requires the courage to say no to what destroys you, even if it disappoints someone. It requires patience to learn to notice your true desires under layers of others' attitudes. It requires honesty, especially with yourself. Jung reminded, "The price of ignoring yourself is too high. We pay for it with anxiety, fatigue, a feeling of being lost, a life that seems to belong to someone else." But when you choose yourself, something amazing happens. The world that seemed hostile suddenly becomes softer. Conflicts that used to drag you in like a swamp lose their strength because you stopped fighting with yourself. Healing is not a destination where you can arrive once and relax. It's a daily choice, choosing your peace instead of others' approval, choosing truth instead of comfortable lies, choosing yourself even when it's scary. That calm, that confidence you were looking for in others was always in you. You just needed to allow yourself to feel it. You deserve a life in which you don't need to constantly look back at others' opinions. You can and should. The only question is, are you ready to take the first step? Because the path to yourself is the only path truly worth taking. If we avoid our wounds, the world will reflect them back to us again and again, like an echo in an empty room, until we finally dare to turn around and face them. Many try to bypass this process, as it requires the courage to admit bitter truths, that what we called love was often dependency, that under the mask of friendship hid mutually beneficial exchange, that most of our decisions were dictated by the fear of not being good enough. But when you start choosing yourself, a turning point occurs. You stop bargaining with your conscience, putting up with what eats you piece by piece, justifying what doesn't deserve justification. And then the scariest thing begins. People leave. Not because you've changed, but because your boundaries have changed. Those who seemed an integral part of your life suddenly dissolve into the past, sometimes even without explanation. What at first seems like a painful loss later turns into freedom. After all, every closed door leaves space for something real. This transition is never easy. Our subconscious clings to the familiar, even if it's poisonous, like a person in a storm holding on to debris of a sinking ship. We endure toxic relationships, humiliating work, draining friendships for years because the fear of the unknown paralyzes more strongly than familiar pain. But it's precisely at the point of this choice, to stay in familiar hell or step into the unknown, that real transformation is born. Letting go doesn't mean instantly forgetting or pretending you don't feel anything. It's accepting that you can't force another person to value you, that your happiness doesn't depend on those who aren't ready to share your value, and that the only one truly responsible for your well-being is yourself. At this moment, the world divides in two: those who continue to seek in the external world what they lost inside, and those who find in themselves the courage to begin the path of healing. Jung called this the road to wholeness, the only path truly worth taking. When you choose yourself, something amazing happens. Your relationships begin to filter themselves by life itself. People accustomed to your constant giving without reciprocity imperceptibly disappear. In their place appear those who see the real you, not because you've changed, but because you stopped settling for half measures. In such relationships, there's no place for victims, only mutual enrichment. But most never reach this point. The reason is simple. Confronting the shadow is painful. It's not just about losing others, but about meeting that part of yourself that allowed bad treatment for years. It's much easier to blame a partner, boss, fate, than to admit everything that happens to us is a reflection of our inner permissions. Jung warned, suppressed parts of our personality don't disappear. They turn into a shadow, an invisible puppeteer who controls us through inexplicable fears, sudden breakdowns, obsessive scenarios. The world changes when you change. Relationships improve when you improve your relationship with yourself. Opportunities come when you stop acting from deficiency and start acting from fullness. Jung said that the unconscious responds to our deep beliefs. When you truly believe you deserve more, the universe reflects it. The question is whether you're ready to see it, ready to let go of what no longer resonates, and open yourself to something completely new. It won't be easy, but I promise it's worth it. When you start living from authenticity, something amazing happens. What used to seem confusing becomes clear. Relationships that drained you now seem unbearable. Situations you tolerated now feel heavy. This is not a coincidence. This is growth. A sign that you're evolving and can no longer ignore what your soul has been whispering to you for years. Jung taught that consciousness is not static. It expands when we dare to look inside. And when this happens, the world cannot remain the same, because the external is merely a reflection of the internal. If there's clarity inside you, it will manifest outside. If there's chaos inside, you'll encounter it around you. When you choose yourself, you begin to attract experiences resonant with your new energy. You no longer need to force connections, beg for love, prove your worth. Everything flows naturally because you're acting not from deficiency, but from fullness. This transition doesn't happen overnight. There will be moments of doubt when the temptation to return to the old will be strong, when loneliness will seem unbearable. But that's where the test lies. Will you betray yourself out of fear of being alone, or will you stand in your authenticity until what is truly meant for you arrives? The unconscious always tests us, not for punishment, but so we prove to ourselves our readiness for the next level. That's why, as soon as you start choosing yourself, people from the past may suddenly appear, trying to restore old dynamics. Life will throw situations that used to throw you off balance, not because you're rolling back, but so you can confirm, this time you choose differently. When you pass this test, your energy changes radically. You're no longer anchored in fear, not attached to the need for approval, not waiting for others to confirm your path. And then the world responds in unexpected ways. Opportunities come effortlessly. People appearing in your life come with respect and genuine interest. What seemed unattainable becomes real. Not because the world has changed, but because now you believe you're worthy of it. Many at this moment feel as if they've finally woken up. All the pain of the past gains meaning. It led you to this moment. Although suffering is never easy, looking back you see that every failure, every loss, every rejection was a disguised liberation. Jung reminded, the unconscious doesn't forget, but it can heal. The wounds of the past don't disappear, but we change our attitude toward them. They stop being chains binding us and become reminders of the path traveled. When you stop seeing your story as a series of failures and begin to perceive it as evolution, everything changes. The problem is that most never reach this point. They get stuck in resentments, nostalgia, guilt, continuing to look back and wish everything was different. But real power is not in what could have been, but in what you can build now. When you choose yourself, you stop living in the past. You no longer need to justify what happened or mourn what was lost. You simply accept that everything happened as it should have, and every experience prepared you for who you are today. And here's where life becomes truly fascinating. When you free yourself from the burden of the past, you understand that the future is completely in your hands. There's no predetermined fate. There are endless possibilities. The only question is, what will you do with this freedom? Will you repeat old stories or dare to write a new one? Most choose the safe, preferring familiar suffering to the risk of being happy. But those who decide to live from authenticity without fear of consequences discover life offers much more than one can imagine. When you choose yourself, the world chooses you too. When you value yourself, life reciprocates. When you let go of what doesn't serve you, what is truly yours finds its way to you. This is not magic and not luck. This is a natural law of energy, a reflection of your growth, an inevitable result of the most important decision, being true to yourself. When you finally choose yourself, life changes course. You no longer cling to pain. Don't try to force others to value you. Don't live in anxiety about your sufficiency, because deep down, you know you're already whole. You don't need to seek outside what has always been inside. But this doesn't mean the path will be easy. There will be days of doubt when old wounds will try to drown out your new voice. Moments when the familiar will beckon you back. The difference is that now you know the truth. Your peace is priceless. Your well-being is non-negotiable. Your worth doesn't depend on others' opinions. And that changes everything. Jung taught the goal of life is not superficial happiness but wholeness, and it can only be achieved by daring to be yourself, without masks, without fear, without chasing approval. Living from authenticity, accepting your light and shadows, understanding that every experience, no matter how difficult, led you to this moment. When you arrive at this, you no longer need approval. You seek authentic connections. You don't want to fit in. You want to belong to a space where you can be yourself. And that's when the real magic happens. When you live from your truth, you attract people and opportunities that truly resonate with you. If these words resonated with you, if at some point you felt they were speaking directly to your soul, know that this knowledge is not just for you. The world is full of people stuck in painful patterns, seeking outside what can only be found inside. You are not alone on this path. Every word of yours can become a light for someone who is just waking up. Every choice you make is confirmation that living from authenticity is possible. Because when you choose yourself, emotional healing flows without obstacles, and your life becomes a reflection of your truth. Keep choosing yourself again and again. And here we've reached the end of the video. Subscribe to our channel, leave a comment with the phrase, I love myself and choose myself. And remember, I choose myself and you, I love us.